The roar of motorcycles filled the air as a group of bikers pulled into the dusty gas station on the outskirts of town. The sun beat down mercilessly, making the heat shimmer off the cracked asphalt. It was just another scorching summer day in this sleepy desert town, or so it seemed. Among the sea of leather jackets and bandanas, a lone figure stood out. A man in crisp military fatigues was filling up his pickup truck, his posture straight as an arrow even in the sweltering heat. The soldier's presence didn't go unnoticed by the rowdy bunch of bikers who had just arrived. As the bikers dismounted their chrome steeds, their eyes locked onto the soldier. Whispers and snickers rippled through their group. One of them, a burly man with a thick beard and arms covered in tattoos, nudged his buddies and jerked his head towards the uniformed man. A mischievous grin spread across his face, spelling trouble. The soldier, seemingly oblivious to the attention he was attracting, calmly replaced the gas nozzle and headed into the station to pay. As the door swung shut behind him, the bikers huddled together, their voices low but their intentions clear. Whatever they were planning, it wasn't going to end well for someone. Inside the station, the air conditioning was a welcome relief from the blistering heat outside. The soldier approached the counter, fishing for his wallet. The cashier, a young woman with tired eyes, managed a small smile as she rang up his purchase. Just as he was about to hand over the cash, a commotion outside caught their attention. The soldier's eyes narrowed as he glanced out the window. The bikers were circling his truck like vultures, their laughter carrying through the glass. One of them had picked up the gas nozzle and was pretending to spray the vehicle, while another was making obscene gestures towards the station. The cashier's smile faded, replaced by a look of concern. "Those guys have been causing trouble around here lately," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Nobody wants to stand up to them." The soldier's jaw clenched, a flicker of something dangerous passing through his eyes. He turned back to the cashier, his voice calm but tinged with steel. "Ma'am, I apologize in advance for any disturbance I might cause." With that, he strode towards the door, his movements purposeful and controlled. The bell above the door chimed as he stepped out into the heat once more, the sound seeming to herald the confrontation to come. The bikers fell silent as the soldier approached, their smirks fading slightly in the face of his unwavering gaze. The bearded leader, however, puffed out his chest and stepped forward, clearly relishing the challenge. "Well, the biker drawled, his voice dripping with mock politeness. "Look what we have here, boys, a real-life G.I. Joe. Tell me, soldier boy, you lost or something? This ain't no army base." The soldier remained silent, his eyes scanning the group, assessing the threat. There were 6 of them, all big, all mean-looking. But there was something in the soldier's demeanor that gave them pause. He didn't look scared. If anything, he looked ready. "What's the matter?" Another biker chimed in, emboldened by his leader's taunt. "Cat got your tum? Or they don't teach you jarheads have to talk to civilians." A small crowd had begun to gather at a safe distance, curious onlookers drawn by the tension in the air. The cashier peered nervously through the window, her hand hovering over the phone, ready to call for help if things escalated. The soldier finally spoke, his voice low and steady. "Gentlemen, I'm going to ask you once, and only once, to step away from my vehicle and leave this establishment. I have no quarrel with you, but I won't hesitate to defend myself if necessary." His words hung in the air for a moment, the threat implicit but clear. The bikers exchanged glances, some of them shifting uneasily, but their leader wasn't backing down. He took another step closer, invading the soldier's personal space. "Oh yeah?" The bearded man sneered, his breath hot on the soldier's face. "And what exactly are you going to do about it, tough guy? In case you haven't noticed, you're outnumbered." A tense silence fell over the gas station. The onlookers held their breath, waiting to see what would happen next. The soldier didn't flinch, didn't back down. He met the biker's gaze squarely, his voice calm but filled with a quiet intensity that sent a shiver down the spines of those watching. "Numbers don't mean much to a man who's faced down insurgents in the mountains of Afghanistan," the soldier said softly. "Now, I'll say it one more time. Back off." Something in his tone made the biker leader hesitate. For the first time, a flicker of doubt crossed his face. But he was in too deep now, his pride on the line in front of his crew. He couldn't back down without losing face. With a growl of frustration, the biker shoved the soldier hard, expecting him to stumble back. But the soldier didn't budge an inch. Instead, Faster than anyone could follow, his hand shot out, gripping the biker's wrist in an iron hold. The biker's eyes widened in surprise and pain. He tried to pull away, but the soldier's grip was unyielding. The other bikers tensed, ready to jump in, but something in the soldier's eyes kept them rooted to the spot. "Last chance," the soldier said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Walk away now, and we can all pretend this never happened." For a moment, it seemed like the biker might actually see reason. But then, with a roar of anger, he swung his free hand towards the soldier's face. What happened next would be talked about in that small town for years to come. The soldier moved with a speed and precision that left the onlookers gasping. In a blur of motion, he sidestepped the punch, using the biker's momentum against him. Before anyone could blink, the burly man was on the ground, face down, with the soldier's knee planted firmly in his back. The other bikers surged forward, but the soldier's voice cracked like a whip. "Unless you want to join your friend here, I suggest you stay right where you are." There was something in his tone, a hint of the battles he'd fought and the things he'd seen, that made them freeze in their tracks. This was no ordinary man they were dealing with. This was a trained warrior, someone who had stared death in the face and come out the other side. The bearded biker struggled beneath the soldier, his face red with exertion and humiliation. "Get off me, you bastard," he snarled. The soldier leaned down, his words for the biker's ears alone. "Listen carefully. I've given you multiple chances to walk away. Now, you're going to make a choice. We can end this here, and you and your friends can ride off and never come back to this town, or we can see how this plays out, and trust me, you won't like the ending." As the tension reached its breaking point, sirens wailed in the distance. Someone, probably the cashier, had called the police. The soldier's gaze swept over the other bikers, daring them to make a move. In that moment, with their leader pinned and the law on its way, the fight seemed to go out of them. They backed away, hands raised in surrender. The soldier had won, not just physically, but psychologically. As the police cars pulled into the gas station, kicking up dust, the onlookers began to murmur excitedly. They had just witnessed something extraordinary, a David versus Goliath moment that would become local legend. But as the dust settled and the authorities took control of the situation, one question lingered in everyone's mind. Who was this soldier? And what would happen when the bikers inevitably sought revenge? The story was far from over, and the quiet town would never be the same again. As the police cars rolled to a stop, their lights painting the gas station in flashes of red and blue, the soldier slowly released his hold on the biker leader. He stood up, his movements deliberate and controlled, hands visible to show he wasn't a threat. The other bikers shuffled nervously, caught between wanting to help their fallen comrade and fear of the consequences. Two officers stepped out of the lead car, hands resting cautiously on their holsters as they surveyed the scene. The older of the two, a grizzled veteran with salt and pepper hair, approached the soldier first. His keen eyes took in the military fatigues, the ramrod straight posture, and the calm demeanor of the man before him. "What's going on here?" the officer asked, his tone professional but wary. The soldier met his gaze steadily. "Just a misunderstanding, sir. These gentlemen and I had a disagreement, but I believe we've reached an understanding now." The biker leader, now on his feet and rubbing his sore arm, snorted in derision. "Understanding? This psycho attacked me." The younger officer moved to intercept the advancing bikers, his hand raised in a warning gesture. "Everyone stay where you are. We're going to sort this out calmly." As the officers began taking statements from those involved and the gathered witnesses, whispers rippled through the crowd. The story of what had transpired spread quickly, growing more elaborate with each retelling. By the time the last statement was taken, the soldier had become a larger-than-life figure in the eyes of the townsfolk. The older officer pulled the soldier aside, his voice low. "Look, son, I appreciate you standing up to these troublemakers. They've been a thorn in our side for months. But I can't condone vigilante justice, even from a military man." The soldier nodded, understanding in his eyes. "I assure you, sir, that wasn't my intention. I only wanted to defuse the situation." The officer sighed, running a hand through his thinning hair. "I believe you, but this isn't over. Those bikers, they're part of a larger group that's been moving into the area. They're not going to take this lying down." As if on cue, the rumble of more motorcycles filled the air. A dozen riders pulled into the gas station, their bikes gleaming in the afternoon sun. At their head was a man whose very presence commanded attention. Tall and lean, with a face weathered by years on the road, he carried himself with the easy confidence of a born leader. The newcomer dismounted, his eyes scanning the scene before settling on the soldier. A small, knowing smile played at the corners of his mouth as he approached. "Well, well," he drawled, his voice carrying across the suddenly silent gas station. "Looks like we've got ourselves a real-life hero in town." The soldier remained silent, his posture tense but ready. The biker leader who had been pinned earlier scrambled to his feet, a mixture of relief and embarrassment on his face. "Boss," he started, but the newcomer silenced him with a look. "I can see you boys have had an eventful afternoon," the biker boss said, his tone deceptively light. "Care to fill me in on what's been happening in my absence?" As the situation was explained, the biker boss's expression remained unreadable. He listened intently, his eyes never leaving the soldier's face. When the tale was done, he let out a low whistle. "Impressive," he said, nodding towards the soldier. "Not many men could take on 6 of my boys and come out on top. You got skills, I'll give you that." The compliment hung in the air, laced with an undercurrent of threat. The soldier inclined his head slightly but remained silent, wary of the man before him. The biker boss turned to the police officers, his demeanor changing to one of polite concern. "Officers, I hope my boys haven't caused too much trouble. We're just passing through, you understand. No need for any of this to go further, is there?" The older officer frowned, clearly torn between his duty and the desire to avoid escalating the situation. "That depends on whether anyone wants to press charges." All eyes turned to the soldier. He stood there, considering his options, aware that his decision could have far-reaching consequences for the town and its people. After a moment, he shook his head. "No charges. Like I said, it was just a misunderstanding." The biker boss clapped his hands together, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "Wonderful. Then I'd say our business here is concluded. Boys, mount up. We got places to be." As the bikers prepared to leave, the boss approached the soldier one last time. He leaned in close, his voice pitched low so only the soldier could hear. "You've made quite an impression, my friend. But let me give you some friendly advice. This town, it's going to be ours soon enough. You do well to stay out of our way." With that, he turned and strode back to his bike. The roar of engines filled the air once more as the bikers rode off, leaving behind a cloud of dust and a sense of unfinished business. As the crowd began to disperse and the police prepared to leave, the old officer approached the soldier one last time. "You've stirred up a hornet's nest, son. Those men, they're not going to forget this. And their boss, he's not someone to be trifled with." The soldier nodded, his expression grim. "I understand, sir, but I couldn't stand by and do nothing." The officer sighed, a mix of admiration and concern in his eyes. "No, I suppose you couldn't. Just watch your back, and if you need anything, don't hesitate to call us." As the last of the police cars pulled away, the soldier was left alone at the gas station. The cashier, who had watched the entire scene unfold, approached him hesitantly. "That was incredible," she said, her voice filled with awe. "I've never seen anyone stand up to them like that. But what happens now?" The soldier turned to her, a small, reassuring smile on his face. Now we wait, and we prepare." As he drove away from the gas station, the soldier's mind was racing. He had come to this small town looking for peace, a place to heal from the scars of war. Instead, he had found a community under siege, terrorized by men who thought might may right. He knew he should leave, move on to another town and leave this fight behind, but something held him back. Maybe it was the look of hope in the cashier's eyes, or the quiet desperation he had sensed in the townspeople. Or maybe it was simply that he was tired of running, tired of turning his back on those who needed help. Whatever the reason, as he pulled into the driveway of the small house he had rented on the outskirts of town, the soldier made a decision. He wasn't going anywhere. This town needed someone to stand up for it, and he was just the man for the job. But as night fell and the town settled into an uneasy quiet, questions lingered. Who was this mysterious soldier? What had brought him to this small desert town? And more importantly, what would happen when the bikers inevitably returned, seeking revenge? The battle at the gas station was over, but the war for the soul of the town was just beginning. And as the soldier prepared for what was to come, he knew that the hardest fights were still ahead. The following days in the small desert town were charged with an electric tension. Word of the confrontation at the gas station spread like wildfire, and a mysterious soldier became the talk of every diner, arbor shop, and front porch. Some hailed him as a hero, a beacon of hope in their struggle against the encroaching biker gang. Others worried his actions would only bring more trouble down on their heads. At the local diner, Mabel's Place, the soldier sat in a corner booth, nursing a cup of coffee as he observed the bustling breakfast crowd. The bell above the door chimed, and in walked Sheriff Tom Hanson, the older officer from the gas station incident. Their eyes met, and after a moment's hesitation, the sheriff made his way over. "Mind if I join you?" he asked, sliding into the opposite seat without waiting for a response. The soldier nodded, pushing a menu towards him. "You know," the sheriff began, his voice low, "I never did catch your name that day." The soldier paused, then set down his cup. Jack Reeves." Sheriff Hanson nodded, a ghost of a smile on his weathered face. "Well, Jack seemed to become quite the local celebrity. Not everyone's happy about it, though." Just then, the diner's door swung open again, and a hush fell over the room. A group of men in leather jackets swaggered in, their eyes scanning the crowd before settling on Jack and the sheriff. The leader, a wiry man with a snake tattoo coiling up his neck, sauntered over to their booth. "Well, if it isn't the town's new guardian angel," he sneered, leaning on the table. "Enjoying your moment in the spotlight, soldier boy?" Jack remained calm, his gaze steady. "Just having breakfast. You're welcome to find your own table." The biker's eyes narrowed, but before he could respond, Sheriff Hanson spoke up. "Is there a problem here, gentlemen?" For a tense moment, it seemed like things might escalate, but then the biker straightened up, a cold smile on his face. "No problem at all, Sheriff. Just welcoming the newcomer to our little town." With a final glare at Jack, he and his crew found a table on the other side of the diner. As the normal chatter of the diner slowly resumed, Sheriff Hanson leaned in. "That's Viper, one of the higher-ups in the gang. He's bad news, Jack. You put a target on your back." Jack nodded, his expression grim. "I figured as much, but I couldn't just stand by and do nothing." The sheriff sighed, running a hand through his thinning hair. "I understand. But this town, it's complicated. The bikers, they got their fingers in everything. Some folks are scared, sure, but others, they're benefiting from the arrangement." Before Jack could respond, their waitress approached. It was Sarah, the cashier from the gas station. Her eyes lit up when she saw Jack. "Oh, I'm glad to see you're okay," she said, a slight blush coloring her cheeks. "After what happened, I was worried they might come after you." Jack offered her a reassuring smile. "I can take care of myself, but thank you for your concern." As Sarah took their orders and walked away, Sheriff Hanson watched Jack with a knowing look. "She's a good kid. Her brother, though, he's mixed up with the bikers. A lot of young folks are. They see the money, the excitement. They don't realize the cost until it's too late." The conversation was interrupted by a commotion from the bikers' table. Viper had a young man by the collar, his voice raised in anger. "You think you can just walk away? Nobody leaves unless the boss says so." Jack was on his feet in an instant, but Sheriff Hanson grabbed his arm. "Don't. This isn't your fight." But as the young man's frightened eyes met Jack's across the diner, he knew he couldn't stand idly by. He shook off the sheriff's hand and strode towards the escalating confrontation. "Let him go," Jack said, his voice calm but carrying an undercurrent of steel. Viper turned, his eyes blazing with fury and a hint of fear. "You again? Mind your own business, soldier boy. This doesn't concern you. When you're assaulting someone in public, it becomes everyone's business," Jack replied, standing his ground. The tension in the diner was palpable. Everyone watched, holding their breath, waiting to see what would happen next. Viper's grip on the young man loosened, but his glare intensified. "You have no idea what you're getting into," Viper hissed. "This is bigger than you. Bigger than this whole damn town." Before Jack could respond, Sheriff Hanson appeared at his side, hand resting cautiously on his holster. "All right, that's enough. Viper, you and your boys need to leave. Now." For a moment, it seemed like Viper might refuse. Then he released the young man, shoving him away. "This isn't over," he snarled, pointing at Jack. "You've made a big mistake, crossing us." As the bikers filed out of the diner, the young man they'd been threatening approached Jack, his eyes wide with a mix of fear and gratitude. Thanks, mister. I. I didn't know what to do. Jack studied him closely. He couldn't have been more than 20, with the lanky build of someone who'd recently hit a growth spurt. What's your name, son? Tommy, the young man replied, glancing nervously at the door. Tommy Carter. I gotta go. Thanks again. As Tommy hurried out, Sarah appeared at Jack's elbow, concern etched on her face. That's my brother, she said softly. What? What did they want with him? Jack exchanged a look with Sheriff Hanson. The pieces were starting to fall into place, and the picture they formed was troubling. This wasn't just about a gang muscling in on a small town. There was something bigger at play here, something that had ensnared the town's youth and threatened to tear the community apart. As the diner buzzed with excited chatter about what had just transpired, Jack knew that his simple hope for a quiet life had vanished. He was in the middle of this now, whether he liked it or not. The question was, how deep did this go, and what would it take to put things right? Outside, the desert sun beat down on the dusty streets, oblivious to the undercurrents of tension and fear that ran through the town. And somewhere out there, the biker gang was plotting their next move. The battle lines had been drawn, and Jack Reeves found himself at the center of a storm that threatened to engulf everything and everyone around him. The weeks following the diner incident were tense, like the calm before a storm. Jack Reeves found himself walking a tightrope, balancing his desire to help the town with the need to avoid escalating the conflict. He spent his days getting to know the locals, listening to their stories, and piecing together the complex web of relationships that tied the town to the biker gang. Sarah became a frequent visitor to Jack's small rental house, bringing home-cooked meals and town gossip. They're saying you're some kind of special forces, she said one evening, perched on his porch railing. That you got training none of us can even imagine. Jack smiled ruefully, his eyes distant. People like their stories. Truth is, I'm just a man who's seen too much and is trying to do what's right. But Sarah wasn't easily deterred. What about Tommy? Have you seen him? Jack's expression grew serious. He hadn't told Sarah about his suspicions regarding her brother's involvement with the gang. Not since that day at the diner. Sarah, I think Tommy might be in over his head. Before he could elaborate, the roar of motorcycles filled the air. A group of bikers thundered past Jack's house, their eyes locked on him as they rode by. It wasn't an accident, it was a message. The next day, Jack paid a visit to Sheriff Hanson at the station. The older man looked tired, the weight of the town's problems evident in the slump of his shoulders. They're getting bolder, Jack said without preamble. Whatever they're planning, it's coming to a head soon. Hanson nodded grimly. I know. We found one of our deputies beaten half to death last night. He was investigating some warehouses on the outskirts of town. Said he saw something he wasn't supposed to. Jack leaned forward, his voice low. What kind of something? Drugs? Weapons? Who knows? But it's big, Jack. Bigger than anything this town's ever seen. As they talked, piecing together what they knew, a pattern began to emerge. The gang wasn't just terrorizing the town. They were using it as a hub for a much larger operation, and they were recruiting the town's youth to do their dirty work. That night, as Jack walked home, he felt eyes on him from every shadow. The town that had seemed so peaceful when he first arrived now felt like a powder keg ready to explode. He quickened his pace, his instincts from years of combat on high alert. He was almost home when a figure stepped out of the darkness. It was Tommy, Sarah's brother, looking nervous and strung out. Mr. Reeves, he said, his voice shaky. I need help. Jack ushered him inside, checking the street before closing the door. What's going on, Tommy? The young man's story came out in a rush. He'd gotten involved with the gang for the money, but things had quickly spiraled out of control. Now, he was in too deep and scared for his life. They're bringing in a big shipment tomorrow night, Tommy said, his eyes wild. At the old airstrip outside town. But it's not just drugs. There's something else, something they're real nervous about. Jack's mind raced. This could be the break they needed to bring down the gang's operation. But it was also incredibly dangerous. Tommy, I need you to stay here tonight. Don't tell anyone where you are, not even Sarah. As Tommy settled into the spare room, Jack made a call to Sheriff Hanson. They agreed to meet at first light to plan their next move. But as Jack tried to sleep that night, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were missing something crucial. The next day passed in a blur of preparation and tension. Jack and Hansen gathered what trusted deputies they could, but they were woefully outnumbered. As dusk fell, they set out for the old airstrip, the desert wind carrying the promise of violence. They arrived to find the place seemingly deserted. Old hangars loomed in the twilight, the shadows stretching across the cracked tarmac. Jack's instincts screamed that something was wrong. "It's too quiet," he whispered to Hansen. "They should be here by now." Suddenly, the night exploded into chaos. Bright lights flooded the airstrip, momentarily blinding them. The roar of motorcycles filled the air as bikers seemed to materialize from every direction. In the center of it all stood the biker boss from the gas station, his face twisted in a triumphant sneer. Well, he called out. "Looks like the soldier boy brought some friends to our little party." Jack's mind raced. How had they known? Then it hit him. Tommy, it had been a setup from the start. As the bikers closed in, weapons glinting in the harsh light, Jack realized they were hopelessly outnumbered and outgunned. He shared a grim look with Hansen. Whatever happened next, it was clear that this was the moment everything had been building towards. The biker boss stepped forward, his voice carrying across the tarmac. "I gave you a chance to walk away, soldier. Now, you're going to learn why nobody crosses us and lives to tell about it." Jack's hand hovered near his concealed weapon, every muscle in his body tense and ready. He knew that what happened in the next few moments would determine not just his fate, but the fate of the entire town. The air crackled with tension as both sides faced off, neither willing to make the first move. In the distance, a lone coyote howled, its mournful cry seeming to echo the dire situation. As Jack stared down the biker boss, his mind raced through possible scenarios, looking for a way out that didn't end in bloodshed. But deep down, he knew that sometimes peace could only be won through conflict. The biker boss's hand inched towards his jacket, where the outline of a gun was visible. Jack's fingers twitched, ready to draw at a moment's notice. The world seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see who would make the first move in this high-stakes showdown. The tension at the airstrip was palpable, with both sides poised on a knife's edge. Just as it seemed the situation would erupt into violence, the distant wail of sirens pierced the night air. The biker boss's triumphant sneer faltered for a moment, confusion flashing across his face. Jack's mind raced. He hadn't called for backup. Who could be coming? The sound grew louder, and suddenly, a convoy of police vehicles burst onto the airstrip, lights flashing and sirens blaring. But these weren't local cops. The vehicles bore the insignia of the state police and the DEA. In the chaos that ensued, Jack caught sight of a familiar face emerging from one of the lead vehicles. It was Sarah, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and determination. Beside her stood Tommy, looking both terrified and relieved. The biker boss, realizing he'd been outmaneuvered, barked orders to his men. "Scatter! Get the shipment out of here!" As the bikers scrambled, Jack seized the moment of confusion to act. He tackled the boss, both of them hitting the ground hard. They grappled in the dust, each fighting for control. The boss managed to land a solid punch, but Jack's military training kicked in. He countered with a swift move, pinning the larger man to the ground. Around them, the scene had descended into chaos. Bikers clashed with law enforcement, the sound of shouting and screeching tires filling the air. Sheriff Hansen and his deputies joined the fray, working alongside the state troopers to subdue the gang members. As Jack handcuffed the biker boss, Sarah rushed over, her words tumbling out in a rush. "Jack, I'm so sorry. Tommy told me everything. We couldn't let you walk into a trap. I called my cousin in the state police, told her what was happening." Jack's mind whirled, processing this new information. "You took a huge risk," he said, his tone a mix of admiration and concern. "But how did you know where we'd be?" Tommy stepped forward, his face a mask of shame and resolve. "I told her. I couldn't go through with it. Couldn't let them hurt you or Sarah, so I came clean about everything." Before Jack could respond, a loud explosion rocked the airstrip. One of the old hangars had burst into flames, sending a plume of thick, black smoke into the night sky. The acrid smell of burning chemicals filled the air. "The shipment," the biker boss yelled, struggling against his restraints. "You idiots, do you know what you've done?" A state trooper rushed over, her face grim. "We need to evacuate the area now. That fire's not just drugs. We're picking up readings of some highly volatile compounds. This whole place could go up at any minute." As the evacuation order spread, Jack realized the night was far from over. The fire was spreading rapidly, threatening to engulf the entire airstrip. And somewhere in that inferno was evidence that could bring down not just this local gang, but potentially a much larger criminal network. Jack turned to Sarah and Tommy. "Get out of here, both of you. It's not safe." Then he looked at the trooper. "I'm going in. There might still be people trapped, and we can't let that evidence burn." Before anyone could protest, Jack was sprinting towards the burning hangar. The heat was intense, the smoke thick and choking. He could hear voices shouting, calling for help. As he plunged into the smoke-filled building, Jack knew he was racing against time. The interior of the hangar was a maze of burning crates and twisted metal. Jack moved swiftly, years of combat experience guiding him through the chaos. He found two bikers trapped under a fallen beam and quickly worked to free them, urging them towards the exit. As he pushed deeper into the inferno, Jack spotted a large metal container, partially obscured by flames. Something told him this was what they'd been looking for. He fought his way closer, the heat searing his skin even through his clothes. Just as he reached the container, a secondary explosion rocked the hangar. The roof groaned ominously, sections beginning to cave in. Jack knew he had only seconds to act. He grabbed what he could from the container, a laptop and a handful of documents, and turned to run. The scene outside the hangar was one of controlled chaos. Fire trucks had arrived, their crews battling to contain the blaze. Paramedics tended to the injured, while police secured the perimeter and rounded up the remaining gang members. As Jack emerged from the smoke, clutching his hard-won evidence, he was immediately swarmed by paramedics. Through the haze of activity, he caught sight of Sarah's relieved face and Sheriff Hanson's approving nod. But even as he handed over the evidence to the DEA agents, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that this was far from over. The biker boss's words echoed in his mind. What exactly had been in that shipment? And more importantly, who was really behind all of this? As dawn broke over the desert, casting a surreal glow over the smoldering airstrip, Jack knew that the events of this night had set in motion something far bigger than a small-town conflict. The battle might have been won, but the war was just beginning. In the days following the airstrip showdown, the small desert town buzzed with activity. State and federal agents combed through evidence, interrogating arrested gang members and piecing together the extent of the criminal operation. Jack found himself at the center of it all, working closely with the authorities to unravel the complex web of corruption and crime. The laptop and documents he'd retrieved from the burning hangar proved invaluable. They revealed a network far more extensive than anyone had imagined, implicating not just the local biker gang, but also high-ranking officials in neighboring states. The town had been merely a cog in a much larger machine of drug trafficking and money laundering. As the investigation progressed, Jack couldn't shake a nagging feeling that they were still missing something crucial. The biker boss, now in custody, maintained a smug demeanor despite facing serious charges. It was as if he knew something they didn't. One evening, as Jack pored over the evidence in Sheriff Hanson's office, Sarah burst in, her face flushed with excitement. "Jack." Tommy remembered something. He overheard the boss talking about a failsafe, something hidden in the old mine outside town. Jack's instincts kicked into high gear. This could be the missing piece they'd been searching for. Within the hour, a team was assembled, and they set out for the abandoned mine, the desert night cloaking their movements. As they approached the mine entrance, Jack felt the familiar tingle of anticipation he'd known so well in combat. Something big was waiting for them, he was sure of it. The team moved cautiously into the dark tunnel, their flashlights casting eerie shadows on the rough-hewn walls. Deep in the mine, they discovered a hidden chamber, filled with high-tech computer equipment that seemed out of place in the rustic setting. Jack's eyes widened as he realized what they'd stumbled upon, a command center, the nerve hub of the entire operation. As the tech experts got to work decrypting the systems, Jack noticed a small safe tucked away in a corner. Using skills he'd rather forget he possessed, he managed to crack it open. Inside was a single USB drive. The contents of the drive sent shockwaves through the entire investigation. It contained irrefutable evidence linking the criminal network to several prominent politicians and business leaders, some at the national level. The corruption ran deeper than anyone had imagined. But as Jack and the team reveled in their discovery, a low rumble echoed through the mine. The ground beneath their feet began to tremble. Realization dawned on Jack's face. It was a trap. The biker boss's failsafe wasn't just evidence. It was a plan to bury it all, along with anyone who discovered it. "Everyone out now," Jack shouted, grabbing the drive and essential evidence. The team scrambled towards the exit as the tremors intensified. Rocks and debris rained down around them as they raced against time. Just as they burst out of the mine entrance, a massive explosion rocked the hillside. The mine collapsed in on itself, sending up a cloud of dust that blotted out the stars. As the team caught their breath, the magnitude of what they just escaped began to sink in. In the days that followed, the full scope of their discovery came to light. The evidence they'd recovered led to a series of high-profile arrests that sent shockwaves through corridors of power across the country. The small desert town found itself at the center of a national story, its name splashed across headlines and news broadcasts. As the dust settled, Jack found himself hailed as a hero, not just by the townspeople, but by a grateful nation. Offers poured in, book deals, speaking engagements, even a potential run for office. But as he stood on the porch of his small rental house, watching the desert sunset, Jack felt a familiar restlessness stirring within him. Sarah joined him, her presence a comforting constant amidst the whirlwind of recent events. "So, what's next for the town hero?" she asked, a hint of worry in her voice. Jack turned to her, a small smile playing on his lips. "You know, for the first time in a long while, I'm not sure. But I think I might stick around for a bit. This town's been through a lot. Might need someone to help keep an eye on things." As they stood there, the desert breeze carrying the promise of a new chapter, Jack's phone buzzed with a message. It was from an unknown number, containing just 4 words. "It's not over yet." Jack's jaw clenched as he read the message. He'd thought this was the end, but it seemed the story was far from finished. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and purple, Jack Reeves realized that his greatest battle might still lie ahead. But this time, he wouldn't be facing it alone. The sleepy desert town had changed him as much as he had changed it. Whatever challenges lay ahead, Jack knew that he had found something here worth fighting for. As the first stars began to twinkle in the darkening sky, he felt ready to face whatever came next, one day at a time. The mysterious text message weighed heavily on Jack's mind in the days that followed. He debated whether to share it with the authorities but decided to keep it to himself for now. Something told him this was a personal challenge, one he needed to face on his own terms. Life in the small desert town gradually returned to a semblance of normalcy. The national spotlight faded, leaving the residents to rebuild and heal. Jack found himself settling into a new routine, helping out at the sheriff's office and lending a hand to anyone who needed it. One sunny afternoon, as Jack was helping Sheriff Hanson repair a fence at the edge of town, the older man paused, wiping sweat from his brow. "You know, Jack, I've been meaning to ask. What made you choose our little town in the first place?" Jack leaned on his shovel, his eyes scanning the horizon. "Honestly, it was random. I was just driving, no real destination in mind. But something about this place, it felt right. Like maybe I could find some peace here." Hanson chuckled. "Well, you certainly stirred things up before finding that peace. But I'm glad you stayed. This town needs good men like you." As they worked, Jack's mind wandered to the future. He'd spent so long running from his past, from the memories of war and loss that haunted him. But here, in this town that had faced its own battles, he felt a sense of belonging he hadn't experienced in years. That evening, Jack met Sarah at Mabel's place for dinner. The diner was buzzing with the usual crowd, but there was a lightness in the air that hadn't been there before. As they slid into a booth, Sarah handed him a local newspaper. "Look," she said, pointing to an article. "They're talking about turning the old airstrip into a community center. Tommy's even volunteering to help with the construction." Jack smiled, genuinely pleased to see the positive changes taking root. "That's great. How is Tommy doing?" Sarah's expression softened. "Better. He's got a long road ahead, but he's committed to making things right. Says he wants to make sure no other kids get caught up in that life." As they chatted over burgers and shakes, Jack felt a sense of contentment wash over him. The wounds of his past weren't gone, but they seemed less raw here, surrounded by people who had faced their own demons and come out stronger. Weeks turned into months, and Jack found himself becoming more integrated into the fabric of the town. He started a self-defense class for the local teens, teaching them not just how to protect themselves, but also the importance of discipline and respect. On weekends, he'd often be found at the construction site of the new community center, working alongside Tommy and other volunteers. The mysterious text message remained at the back of his mind, a constant reminder that there might be unfinished business. But as time passed without incident, Jack allowed himself to hope that perhaps it had been an empty threat. Then, on a crisp autumn morning, everything changed. Jack was at the sheriff's office, helping to organize some files, when a call came in. A trucker had spotted something suspicious at an abandoned gas station on the outskirts of town. Jack and Sheriff Hanson drove out to investigate. As they pulled up to the derelict building, Jack's instincts kicked into high alert. Something about the scene felt off. "Stay behind me," he murmured to Hanson as they approached the boarded-up entrance. Inside, the gas station was a mess of dust and debris. But there, propped against an old cash register, was a single envelope with Jack's name scrawled across it. With a growing sense of unease, Jack opened the envelope. Inside was a single photo, a satellite image of the town, with several locations marked in red. One of them was the community center construction site. "We need to evacuate the town now," Jack said, his voice tight with urgency. What followed was a whirlwind of activity. As sirens blared and emergency services sprang into action, Jack coordinated with local and state authorities to secure the marked locations. The community center site was a hive of activity when they arrived, with bomb squad units carefully combing through the half-finished structure. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the desert landscape, the all-clear was finally given. No explosives have been found, but several dead-drop locations have been discovered, containing evidence that linked back to the remnants of the criminal network they thought they dismantled. In the aftermath, as the townspeople gathered in the school gymnasium for a community meeting, Jack stood before them, his face etched with determination. "I know you're all scared and confused," he began. "I am too. But what we discovered today proves that the threat to our town isn't over. They thought they could intimidate us, make us live in fear. But that's not who we are." A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. Jack continued, his voice gaining strength. "We've faced challenges before, and we've overcome them together. This is no different. From this moment on, we stay vigilant, we look out for each other, and we show these criminals that they messed with the wrong town." The gymnasium erupted in cheers and applause. As Jack stepped down from the podium, he was swarmed by people offering words of support and thanks. In that moment, he realized that this wasn't just a town he had stumbled upon anymore. It was home. Later that night, as Jack sat on his porch, the events of the day replaying in his mind, Sarah joined him. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the stars twinkle in the vast desert sky. "You know," Sarah said finally, "when we first came to town, I thought you were just passing through, another drifter with a troubled past. But now, I can't imagine this place without you." Jack turned to her, a mix of emotions playing across his face. "I can't imagine being anywhere else," he replied softly. As they sat there, the cool night air carrying the scent of sage and distant rain, Jack felt a sense of peace settle over him. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. There were still battles to be fought, challenges to overcome, but he wasn't alone anymore. In this small desert town, with its resilient people and wide-open skies, Jack Reeves had found more than just a place to lay low. He found a purpose, a community, and perhaps even a future. The mysterious text message that had once filled him with dread now felt like a call to action. Whatever came next, he would face it head-on, with the strength of an entire town behind him. As the first light of dawn began to paint the eastern sky, Jack stood up, stretching his tired muscles. Another day was beginning, bringing with it new possibilities and challenges. But for the first time in years, he felt ready to face them all. The story of the soldier who stood up to a biker gang had evolved into something much more. It had become a tale of redemption, of community, and of the power of standing together in the face of adversity. And as Jack Reeves watched the sun rise over his adopted home, he knew that the greatest chapters of this story were still yet to be written.